Hey guys, got a new opening idea to share with you, and this is one for when you're playing with black and you are facing the opening 1d4 from white. This is of course very popular and very often leads to the London system, the accelerated London system, when white wants to bring out his bishop. Now, a lot of us are looking for a way to respond to 1d4. So there are quite a few options. You can play, for example, d5, and then you can find yourself in interesting territory with, for example, c4 and the Queen's Gambit. Generally, you don't want to accept the gambit here. The most common responses from black, in games that I've played as white, I've only played this handful of times, but d takes c4, it has been the most popular approach. But then you can simply occupy the full centre with the threat of the bishop recapturing the pawn. So, and at the top levels, Queen's Gambit accepted is pretty rare. So you've got Queen's Gambit declined with e6. This is standard and very popular at high levels. You've also got the Slav defence with c6. And that's interesting. It releases your own queen. If takes, you can just recapture with a pawn, and you should have a decent game there. So other approaches you can take. You've got the England Gambit, but that really isn't recommended. Yeah, you've got tricks in the England Gambit, but it's not particularly solid. So I've played this as white. I've played this 1,000 times, over 1,000 times it appears, with a 58% win rate. That's not too bad, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's solid, and it shouldn't lead to good play or good games really for black. Another classical approach is the Dutch, with pushing f5. Lots of approaches to that. You've got Stonewall ideas. You've got classical Dutch. You've got the Leningrad as well, which I've been playing recently. But otherwise, that's more or less it. Obviously, you can't just develop your knight because you'll just get kicked straight away and lose time. But another idea is, thank you, Cockerel, is the Old Benoni. Okay. Now, there's a modern Benoni which starts with knight to f6, and then you're going to play the key move, pawn to c5. The old Benoni starts with c5 straight away. So, as white, I have faced this about 200 times, okay, in all my time on chess.com. And so let's just flip that and flip the board around, okay? So, as white, c5, it says here I've faced 51 times, okay? But black has won 49% of those games, white has won 47. So this seems to be, at the 1000 to 1500 level, pretty successful. So let's look. Got d5, 42% for black. e6, the French. No, e6 is, what is that? The Horowitz defence. Woo! Okay, 43% for black. Knight to f6, 55% for black. That's an interesting one. So that's like King's Indian kind of approach, which makes sense. g6, 56% for black. So g6, okay, so g6, same kind of deal. So we're going to get bishop fianchetto there. c5, 49% for black. So black has won more games than I have won in 51 games with the move c5. Okay, now let's go through some of the ideas in the Old Benoni. Okay, so I'm going to flip the board again, and so now we're playing with the black pieces. So why are we pushing c5? Well, it kind of looks like a gambit, doesn't it? Because you're kind of offering what appears to be a free pawn for white. So let's just start and say white takes the pawn. Okay, so I'm going to refer to my notes as we go here, and here you simply play e6, right? And you are immediately threatening to recapture the pawn. And you have a slight lead here. Your bishop and your queen are able to come out into the game. Okay, now let's say that white wants to defend the pawn and plays b4. Now this isn't ideal really for white. So if they push b4, you can push b5. Okay, and should they take there, you can simply recapture the pawn. You've got a bishop already staring down f2. This rook can come out and grab the pawn back, or the queen can come out and grab the pawn back straight away. So that's really not a great option. Let's say that white wants to maintain this pawn and pushes a3. Well, that's very simple. If they push a3, you simply capture, and you've now got two attackers on this pawn. And clearly, white can't retake and maintain the defense of c5 because he loses a rook. Simple as that. Okay, so that's just not an option. Okay, so if you push a5, so he pushes a3, a takes b4 is pretty straightforward. You're about to win another pawn and all is good there. So what about you push a5 there? What about if he pushes c3 to try and defend the pawn? Well, then you go ahead and you capture anyway, and c takes. Now there's a lot of space here on the queen side for white. Okay, so a takes b4, c takes b4, and now you have a lovely move. Okay, this is one to remember. Queen f6. And queen f6 is looking straight down at that rook. The rook cannot move. Okay, now how on earth can white defend this piece? Well, there's really only one way, which is to put the knight here on c3, queen takes knight with check and a fork on the rook, and white can move the bishop to there, but white is already down a full piece. And so you should be in for a very good game here after queen a3, say. So that's all good. You can also play queen b2, threatening to capture the pawn with a rook. So this is all good. So that's if they use the c pawn to defend that, then you bring the queen out. Okay. Now what else could they do? So you play this, and how about okay, so b4, a5 we've played, yep. And now they can't bring out bishop b5. That's a mistake in my notes. What if b takes a5? B takes a5, you recapture with the bishop. You've got a lead in development. This pawn is not long for this world. Your bishop can come here. The pawn's a goner. Let's say they bring out their bishop to here, and again, just queen f6. Again, looking at that rook. Okay, so it's a tricky approach. Okay, so that's if they capture. Okay, so if they capture, you push e6. So let's say they just abandon the pawn. You can go ahead and grab the pawn back. You've got a bishop looking down on here. You've got the queen ready to come out with a battery. You only have to move your knight. White is a long way from castling as well, so that looks okay. So let's look at a few other quick options. This is the old Benoni there. So that was the accepted variation. The best move for white is actually to push the pawn forwards, and then what you do is you push e5. Right? Now that does give white the option to capture en passant. So let's say they capture there. You then recapture with the f pawn. Okay, and you do have a central pawn majority. You've got 3 pawns here. White only has 1 pawn in the 2 central files. You have 2 pawns in those central files, and you should be in for a reasonable game here. And you want to assert your central pawn dominance, push these pawns forward, control the center, and you should be all right. So that's with the en passant variation. F takes e6. Let's say they just push e4. You now play d5. and you're really looking to assert your control over the center. So they bring out a knight. You could play your knight out as well, and this is looking like a pretty reasonable game. It's kind of familiar to French players probably at this point with this pawn structure here. Okay, but basically otherwise, whatever else white chooses to do, this is probably the best move. But you know, it's moving your first pawn twice, so white really doesn't have much to show for his second move. And apart from that, pretty much anything else that white does, you're just going to capture that pawn, and you should be in for a reasonable game. Maintain this. You've got this pawn majority in the center. So let's say they bring out a knight. This looks pretty comfortable to me. I'm quite happy with this. Could bring out a knight if they exchange again. You've got, you've traded your B pawn basically for their D pawn, and you should be good. White has 0 development. You should be able to carry on, push forward with these, control the center as normal. Okay, so let's try an Old Benoni. I'm going to use my notes. We'll try an Old Benoni against the computer. So I'm going to go to the analysis board. Now, chess.com has recently changed the ways that you can finish a game against the computer. So previously, what we did was, and you'll have seen this in a lot of my videos, that we would set up an opening. For example, so I'm going to play as black, so it would be d4, and then if it's my turn, I would select finish versus computer at the bottom. Now that's disappeared. Now you've got an icon that says practice versus computer. So what you do is you select practice versus computer, and it will always put you in as white. Okay, this from what I can tell. Now this may just be if you are signed up to the chess.com beta, right? But you have, so I'm going to take that move back. I'm going to change my bot to, let's pick Sven 1100, right? So again, take that move back, and I have another icon here, switch sides, right? So I switch sides, and now I am playing as black against Sven playing as white, and I've forced him to play d4 on the first move. So I'm going to play the Old Benoni. Okay, he's played the advance, so I play e5, and now e4. So let me check my notes on that. So e4, and I play d6. Okay, so now you've got this reversed pyramid here, and a pretty solid setup already. But this is the better approach. Now he's pushed c3, so he's taken out a natural square from his knight, but maybe he's thinking about bringing his queen out here. Okay, so advanced variation, we played d6. I don't have a note so far on what to play against c3. Alright, so I'm thinking we have to evaluate the threat of this queen coming out, but that's really nothing. I can just block it with my bishop and gain tempo. So I think I'm going to play my knight out to f6. I'm attacking an undefended pawn here. Alright, and I can just grab the pawn. Okay, now he's brought out a knight. Knight takes e4 is a mistake. So it's coaching me as we go. Bishop to e7 was best. Now, for example, I could just grab the knight off. Okay, now this is only an 1100 bot, so he's in a losing position already. Let's just save my bishop, save it again. Bishop's defending the knight. Queen's coming out here, looking at this. I'm going to defend with my queen. And what's interesting here is that you really are kind of throwing your opponent off his comfort zone. So I'm already nearly 5 points up in this game, so no real reason to carry on with that. But let's have a look, let's go back and say your opponent is a London player, and they always play pawn to d4 and then almost like pre-move bishop out to f4. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, and then they play that because that's what they always play. So I'm going to finish this against the computer again. It's put me in as white, and I'm going to switch sides, and I'm going to change the bot because I don't really fancy my chances against stockfish on the maximum level. And let's go on for Wilson at 1200. Okay, so choose. So I'm switching sides. Okay, so here we are, playing black against the London player who doesn't really know what to do against this one. Now on 2, thank you Rooster. Okay, so 2 bishop to f4, so we have a London player, and basically the rule is if they do anything other than capture or advance with the d pawn, you simply take. Okay, and now I don't know what that was about because he's just given up a queen, a bishop. Okay, let's just grab that pawn off. Could throw in a check here, which you could defend with the knight there. Can't defend with the knight there. I'll just grab the pawn and give check, I guess. Okay, let's give check again. Also looking at this, let's grab that. All right, and trade off queens. And now we're in a completely winning position, plus 8.6 on there. So there you go. If you're looking for a fun and spicy way to respond to 1d4 by white when you've got the black pieces, then the Old Benoni might be interesting. It is perfectly valid. So let's have another look at my games. So my games when I faced d4 as black, okay, okay, so how often is c5 played? So now it's saying, okay, now I've only played it 8 times, and white has won 75% of those games. So white's won 6, I've won 2, right? But when I've played as white, so let's go back. Sometimes you need to, it's a little bit buggy, the Explorer, when you're looking through the database. So c5, 51 times, and it's been slightly better for black. And here, what have I played in the past and what's been most effective? Okay, so here you can see d5. I've played 4 times, I've won 3, drawn 1. Okay, so d5 is actually the best move here. Okay, and the best move here is actually e5, isn't it, for black? But nobody's played that against me. So this is an opening that you will not often find. Okay, let's go back to here. How many times have I played bishop f4? Okay, I've played bishop f4 once, and I actually won that game. Okay, yeah, the database is going a bit screwy here. But yeah, I think this is one worth exploring, guys. I've had mixed results playing the Dutch against d4. It is interesting, it is very solid. Can lead to some quite energetic and spicy games. But if you're looking for a way to get your opponents, particularly if they are London players, out of their comfort zone very early on, then consider this. It looks very gambity, but you're almost certain to get your pawn back if they take. And if they take, that does tend to be very good for black. You can see here, I've got 6 games that I've played. Black has won 5 of those games. Okay, so remember the Old Benoni. Let's try this out for a couple of weeks and see how we get on. And I might share some of my own games in this as well. Let's explore it together. Okay, so if you're looking for a response to d4 that will throw your opponent off the scent, give it a go. All right, thanks for watching. Thank you, Roosters. See you later.